A big diplomatic win for India as China finally relents and allows Jaish-e-Mohammed chief Masood Azhar to be listed as a global terrorist by the United Nations. But will this lead to any real action against the terror group? That's coming up in just a few minutes from now. But first, our big focus tonight is going to be what has happened in New York. The United Nations Security Council has listed Masood Azhar on the sanctions list. He has been banned and blacklisted by the UN Security Council. That's been a massive effort that has been underway for many years now. China absolutely not relenting on this issue for years. It has repeatedly put a hold on this move by India and other countries, but today in what is a big win for India at the UN, diplomatically at least, is that Masood Azhar has finally been listed. Whether it leads to any changes on the ground is still a big question mark, because do remember that Hafiz Saeed, the founder of the NDTV, has also been on this list for many years, as has Azhar's group, the Jaish-e-Mohammed. So whether this leads to any significant change on the ground is still to be tested. Well, we're joined on the phone line from New York by India's envoy to the United Nations, Syed Akbaruddin. Mr. Akbaruddin, thank you very much for speaking to us on NDTV tonight, sir. First of all, congratulations. This is quite a big diplomatic win for you and for India.
Nidhi, thank you very much for providing me an opportunity to explain the situation to your viewers through NDTV. All I'd like to say is that it's a success for all those who stand for zero tolerance for terrorism. It's an effort that we initiated way back in 2009. Since then, we speeded up those efforts in 2016, 2017, and we've succeeded now. Now, like you said, the UN or international organizations are normative bodies. They set norms. And so from that perspective, it's a significant outcome for all of us. Now, the point is whether those norms are followed. That's the next step. And we certainly hope that those who keep telling everyone that they are against terrorism in any form, they oppose their territories to be used by terrorists against anyone else, will abide by those, because this is a global norm. We will wait and see. We will try and see in a verifiable manner what are the next steps. But normatively, this is a distinct, significant step.
Mr. Akbaruddin, just to ask you, what do you think finally brought China around? And you know, this was the big stumbling block for all these years. What do you think finally got them to change their mind on this?
As they say sometimes, all the stars in the entire universe conspire to make something good happen. So there is a growing coalition against terrorists. This is not confined only to the members of the Security Council, and all of them would like to speak in one voice, yes. But this time there were a large number other than the designating states. In this case, there were 3 designating states, that is USA, UK, and France. But a large coalition from within the Security Council was willing to co-sponsor this effort. And surprisingly, many others from outside the Security Council joined in this bid, even without letting us know. They said this was a matter of great importance to them, and of their own accord, they joined in this effort and, of course, coordinated with us. So in terms of the numbers, in terms of the growing sentiment, the outcome was only to be expected.
Mr. Akbaruddin, my final question is that, you know, the listing of Masood Azhar does not make a reference to Pulwama or to Kashmir. And in Pulwama, the Jaish-e-Mohammed had owned up to that attack in February this year. Is that a condition that China had laid down for agreeing to sign off on this, that there would be no reference to Pulwama or the Jaish's role in terrorism in Kashmir?
So, maybe I think all of us need to understand diplomacy contextually rather than pick up bits and pieces. Let's see where this began. This began with the attack in Pulwama on 14th February or 14th February. Immediately, the Security Council on 21st put out a statement. Please have a look at it. It refers to Pulwama. It refers to the Jaish's role. And it was agreed to by everybody, including all the members of the Security Council. So that's a settled issue. Where does this, only based on that settled issue, was the next effort made on 27th February. So if somebody thinks that this is not the sequence of events which led to the final conclusion, they must be in a delusion, because Pulwama was the trigger this time. It led to the Security Council's press statement, and on that basis was this final effort launched. Now, we also need to understand that this is an effort which is ongoing, so it builds on whatever is existing previously. So those who think that, well, if X or Y or Z reference is not there, that's why it happened. My question to you is, why didn't it happen in 2009? Why didn't it happen in 2016? Why didn't it happen in 2017? So let's not be led astray by people who are nitpicking, because the facts of the case are totally contrary to that. It is clear, the context is clear, the references are clear, everybody is on record of their views on Pulwama, and I rest my case with that.
It's the Jaish-e-Mohammed chief now being put on the UN sanctions list, which actually technically means that there is now a ban on his movements, his travel, a freeze on his assets, his finances, and an arms embargo. On the ground, it may not actually translate into much, since it may not entirely restrict his activities, but it is an important diplomatic win for India, given that China finally released its hold on this issue at the UN Security Council after a lot of international pressure led by India, the UK, France, and the United States. In fact, the Prime Minister has spoken about Masood Azhar as well in the last few minutes in a rally in Rajasthan, taking, of course, credit for it. Listen in.
संयुक्त राष्ट्र ने आतंकवादी संगठन जैश-ए-मोहम्मद के सरगना कुख्यात आतंकवादी मसूद अजहर पर प्रतिबंध लगा दिया है। मसूद अजहर को संयुक्त राष्ट्र द्वारा आतंकवादी घोषित करने पर आखिरकार विश्व में सहमति बनी, यह संतोष का विषय है। देर आए दुरुस्त आए। आतंकवाद के खिलाफ संघर्ष में और आतंकवाद को जड़ से उखाड़ने के लिए लंबे समय से भारत जो प्रयास कर रहा था, ये उसकी बहुत बड़ी सफलता है।
Well, Mr. Sheshadri Chari, KC Singh and Jaiveer Shergill are still with us. Michael Kugelman from the Wilson Center joining us from Washington, D.C. Dr. Brahma Chalani also joining us via Skype this evening. But first, Ambassador KC Singh, just to ask you, how big a win is this for India diplomatically? Is this more symbolic than anything else? It is quite significant today that China has taken this line, isn't it?
Yes, but there would have been trade-offs, etc. Nevertheless, it's kudos to the ministry, kudos to the government. Certainly, they are entitled to take the credit, but we must make a realistic assessment of what this implies. You see, we've had to go to what is called the Al-Qaeda Committee. This was created in 1999. So, therefore, when it lists Masood Azhar, it says that he has links to Al-Qaeda. Now, to that extent, Pakistan is quite happy giving it up, because they are not saying it has links to ISI. Although the truth is that he is run by ISI and not run by Al-Qaeda. But the moral and the psychological advantage is tremendous, which is that he is coming out openly, functioning as a freedom fighter, taking up the Kashmir cause. That is not possible any longer, because that shine is taken off and Pakistan will have to restrain him. In fact, a few weeks ago, Pakistan had already begun creating domestic mechanism to implement UN sanctions and act against individuals. But you're absolutely right. It doesn't mean he'll be arrested. because that is not part of what is required. What is required is to seize his assets, not give him any arms, which I don't think they were giving him in any case. And the third one is travel, but he was not traveling in any case. So two of those things are in any case not even relevant. But what is relevant is that psychologically and morally it's an advantage, because Pakistan will have to restrain him, particularly because they are on the grey list, and the Financial Action Task Force would watch them very carefully to see how the financing works.
Well, you say psychologically and morally Pakistan would, have to do something. But Dr. Brahmachalani, the question is, will they do something? Now, in the past also, Hafiz Saeed was, detained. He was under house arrest. Then they said there's no evidence against him. He was let out. He's on this list and he's had a great time. He lives freely in Pakistan and makes anti-India speeches all the time. Masood Azhar, you think might in a token gesture be detained for a while and then let go off after the Financial Action Task Force meets in later in the next couple of months?
Masood Azhar is ailing. He's in hospital. The Jaish is being run by Masood Azhar's close relatives. So this action by the UN is largely symbolic, but it puts a spotlight on Pakistan because Pakistan is home to 22 UN designated terrorist entities and nearly half of all individuals that have been listed as terrorists by the UN. So it reinforces Pakistan's image as a mecca of terror, but it does not change the reality on the ground. It does not address the issue that Pakistan has a long-standing nexus with terrorist groups that its military has nurtured. I think the two critical elements in the coming weeks would be whether the international community, especially the Western powers, will allow an IMF bailout package to be approved for Pakistan, and the other is the Financial Action Task Force. If that Financial Action Task Force were to take Pakistan from the grey list to the blacklist, that would mean Western sanctions against Pakistan, and that could force Pakistan to reform its behavior.
Well, the interesting thing also would be about whether India can expect a genuine change in China's position. And Michael Kugelman, let me ask you that, because it was interesting that the Chinese Foreign Ministry issued a statement a little while ago saying that, this issue had now been properly settled on the listing of Masood Azhar, and then went on to praise the enormous efforts, quote unquote, of Pakistan in fighting terrorism. So that kind of gives you a sense that this is pretty much a one-off by China, isn't it? It's not abandoning Pakistan in the larger sense.
Well, I think you're right. I mean, China clearly had to make some gestures to appease its iron brother, Pakistan. I think that China, when it decided not to allow the designation of Azhar to go through back in March, I think that was a difficult decision for China. I think this is one thing that China would have been more comfortable stepping back on earlier on, for a variety of reasons. One being the BRI project, which requires a lot of stability in the region, and any terrorist is considered to be a threat to stability. There's been tremendous pressure on China to really step back and let Azhar get designated. And when it did not step back in March, that put even more pressure on it now. So I think that this particular decision, one could even say that it was somewhat predictable, that eventually it was going to relent. But no, given the nature of the relationship between China and Pakistan, China is not necessarily going to become tougher on Pakistan. Though I think it is important to trace what appears to be somewhat of an evolution in China's views toward Pakistan in terms of how it looks at the issue of Pakistani terrorism on the world stage. I mean, we saw that China did not stand in the way of FATF sanctioning Pakistan for terrorist financing. We've seen China sign on to a number of joint statements issued by the likes of BRICS and the Heart of Asia Summit in recent years, in which Jaish-e-Mohammed and Lashkar-e-Taiba are both singled out by name as terror groups. So there's that. But no, I don't think we should overstate this, and I think it's important that, as was mentioned before, certainly this is a diplomatic achievement for India, though I think this, other than the diplomatic victory, we're looking at a designation that's symbolic more than anything else, because, the Azhar, as was noted before, is ill, the assets freeze, the travel ban is going to have no impact, and you look at the Hafiz Saeed example, after he was designated 11 years ago, he continued to do what he wanted, including doing media interviews with the New York Times and giving speeches whenever he wants. Other than some some periods when he's been under house arrest, not much has changed. With Azhar, I think we can expect the same, though, of course, Azhar is quite ill, and his ability to do things at any rate is not that significant.
Mr. Chari, we've already heard the Prime Minister talking about Masood Azhar and this ban in his election rally in Rajasthan this evening. And do you think that, in a sense, that this reinforces the national security narrative that Mr. Modi is trying to drive home in his campaign? That he is the one to sort of protect India's interests on that front.
The most important point here is that the diplomatic victory part of it should be understood in the proper perspective. It's not that we knew sometime in March it was expected when Indian leadership diplomatic corps was talking to the diplomatic counterparts in China. It was all to be decided in the Wuhan spirit. And China was trying to come over to the fact that they will ultimately have to jettison Masood Azhar someday or the other, because it was getting too hot for them. Don't forget the fact that China-Pakistan economic corridor is an important aspect as far as Xi Jinping's personal flagship program is concerned. And the most important element of China-Pakistan economic corridor is the entry point into what we have always stood up as Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. And Masood Azhar has a very strong political hold and social hold over this area. Now China wanted to guarantee that they will not be harmed in any way as far as this China-Pakistan economic corridor is concerned. Therefore, almost 3-4 months back, one of the founders of Harkatul Mujahideen, Maulana Fazlur Rahman Khalil, the army made him resign from all those organizations and join Imran Khan's party. In all likelihood, he will be given a political post. Therefore, they have already fortified their interest in that region, and there is no way China will jettison Pakistan so soon. But China decided to jettison Masood Azhar as long as Pakistani army and the PLA could work together in this particular zone and particular area.
That's actually a very important
require
point.
This entry point very important for them to go to Gwadar.
But I do have
Therefore,
to ask I do
China
have to
had
ask
already fortified.
the political question,
They
though,
needed
Mr.
time to
Chari.
recalibrate.
Sure.
They needed time to recalibrate.
But
They needed time to recalibrate, and that is what they have done.
So for the Congress, Jaiveer, I mean, this really does add to that national security narrative that Mr. Modi is going on about in the campaign. This is something that could really benefit him in that sense.
Can I just make one additional point before I answer your question? Let me put it very candidly. It is indeed a welcome step, an outcome of 10 years of effort by the government of India, various diplomats involved, the first request being made under Manmohan Singh Ji's government in 2009. Secondly, for this to be effective, China needs to stop bankrolling Pakistan along with Saudi Arabia. Let's not forget the Crown Prince was there. He promised a huge investment in the Gwadar project, confirmed by the Minister Mukhtam Khusro of $4.5 billion in State Bank of Pakistan. Number 3, Nidhi, I know you give the example of Hafiz Syed. Yes, he is a hero there. But also, we've had arrest of Sheikh Abdul Khwaja, a terrorist, of Abdul Hamza in year 2010 and 12 with the help of China and Saudi Arabia because of this banned list under the government of Dr. Manmohan Singh. We have had results, we have had our hits and misses. So the true victory will be when Masood Azhar is deported to India. Now coming to Mr. Modi, that's his classic style. Mr. Modi will take credit for any achievement of the nation, but go into an hibernation when it comes to accountability. He still has tough questions to answer qua China. The highest incursions we are facing in LAC, the incursion in our airspace in Chimoli, the China objecting to Prime Minister visiting Arunachal, China having a base in Dhoklam, China still bankrolling Pakistan, China still blocking our NSD membership. So that today the nation is witnessing two narratives. When it comes to hearing claps, Mr. Modi has a 56-inch chest. When it is coming to giving answerability, accountability on Naxal attack, diplomatic failures like in China, then he has a 0-inch chest. So I think
you don't think it's a diplomatic win today that he's got? I mean, that India and other countries have managed to get China on board?
I don't think it is. I don't think it is a diplomatic failure. It's a great diplomatic victory, actually.
No, I think I caveated.
That's exactly what I'm asking.
I caveated. My opening remark was, it is a welcome step. It is a diplomatic win for India. It's a culmination, outcome of achievements of the governments of the past 10 years, including BJP, including diplomats serving under BJP, including diplomats serving under Congress. That the envoy said that.
Let me just ask one more question, and this is important. Ambassador Casey saying the listing itself, and I asked Saeed Akbaruddin, our envoy to the UN, about this. If you look at the language, doesn't actually make a reference to Masood Azhar and Pulwama or the role that the Jaish has played in terror attacks in Kashmir. So it's very clear, even though that these references were there in the original proposal pushed forward by the UK and France. So they were clearly dropped, and that appears to have been how China has agreed to come on board on this. Should that matter?
No, that's absolutely correct, because these trade-offs would have taken place. Chinese would have discussed with the Pakistanis what is acceptable, what is the maximum that they would concede, and this would have been part of it, that don't mention them. In any case, as I said, this is the Al-Qaeda committee. There are two committees now, the ISIL committee, which is the ISIS committee, and the Al-Qaeda committee. Now, if you're going to the Al-Qaeda committee, then you have to say that the person has something to do with Al-Qaeda. It is true that when Jaish-e-Mohammed was listed in 2001, when the 9/11 attack took place, Jaish-e-Mohammed was running camps in Afghanistan. Some of the boys, in fact, got killed there when the air attacks took place. So that's why Jaish-e-Mohammed got listed immediately in 2001. But they've resisted with the leader of Jaish-e-Mohammed that Pakistan had dug in. So to that extent, that is obviously a trade-off, that they were not allowed P word or K word to come into this. Be that as it may, as Akbaruddin was explaining, there is a context. People know why the name is there. So that's why I said it's a psychological and a moral victory. But in practical terms, it will have very limited effect. And in addition, there will be a political and a diplomatic cost. The Americans are already saying, we are helping you. You remember 2 weeks ago, we are helping you with this. Now you separate yourself from Iran.
Exactly.
Now I'm sure the Chinese would have also got something from India. Something from India, because the foreign secretary was there last week. Is it on the Belt and Road? Although we haven't attended now, have you given some commitment? So there is always a trade-off on all these things. Question is, was it all so important that you trade off strategic assets or strategic moves for this one tactical advantage, which is of course very useful for the Prime Minister during the election?
Well, Dr. Chelani, do you agree about the give and take that would have happened behind the scenes to get this done? And what do you think we've agreed to do?
Well, let's go back as to how the US, UK and France initiated this step. It was after the February 27th Pakistani aerial blitz into Jammu and Kashmir. They sought to persuade India not to retaliate against Pakistani aggression by promising to deliver on the listing of Masood Azhar as a terrorist. So it was an attempt to win India's restraint, to persuade India to be patient, and that was the primary factor that drove France, Britain and the US to push for Masood Azhar's designation as a terrorist. So that was the real trade-off. India restrained itself, even though the armed forces in India were very eager to wreak massive punishment on Pakistan for targeting Indian military sites in J&K. But ultimately the political leadership restrained the Indian armed forces. So that trade-off is apparent. Now, whether there were other trade-offs, I am not aware of.
All right. Well, let us see what this actually means for Masood Azhar and for the Jaish-e-Mohammed as a group on the ground, because the group itself has been listed for a very long time. Will it make a difference into how it operates vis-a-vis India, as anyone's guess? Thank you very much to all of you for joining us.